Thank you for joining Talking Points today. My name is Dr. Stephen E. Gardner. We have started a brand new series, and this series, it's phenomenal. It's something that we just all need to really rethink, and that's about being passion-driven. Last week, we learned about how passion is really integrated with your purpose. Last week, we learned about the story of Nehemiah and some of the things that we can extract from this man's life that I can fuel my own passion or really understand while I'm driven the way that I'm driven. So welcome today to this episode on Passion Driven Part 2. And guess what we're going to talk about today? I've got to do something right now. Not that we haven't been doing something, but when we are passion driven, we come to this precipice. We come to this place to where we decide and we do what's in our heart to do. I've got to do something right now. Let's look at this quote here. And this quote, it's an easy quote. And it says, and it's true, there are some people that don't want the change that you seek. They are too concretized in the way things have always been. There are some people that don't want the change that you seek. They're too concretized in the way that things have always been. And oftentimes we call this concretization the status quo. Some people are just comfortable with the status quo and they don't want things to change. They don't want things to move. That's one of the problems that we have here in America in various aspects of our society, whether it be aspects that are related to social injustice or aspects related to policing or aspects that are related to education or whatever the case it might be. There is a status quo, and there are people that do not want the change that you seek. And having come to that understanding and realization that people don't want the change that you seek, it's going to require you to be passion driven. It's going to require you to draw from an inner source to fuel your passion, or rather that fuels your passion to go and do all the things that are required for you to see the very hand of God, or for you to see the very idea that I believe He's placed in your heart to do. That idea can come to fruition, but it's going to require you to be driven by your passion. So let's do a recap on the definition and description of passion. Passion means intense, driving, or overmastering feeling or conviction. Now, we've heard the term overwhelmed. So a lot of time when someone is overwhelmed, we always take it in a negative connotation. But think of this type of emotion of overmastering or overwhelmed with this idea or feeling or conviction. Something has really caused you to rise up to the surface. Something has caused an interchange inside you that has shifted your approach, that has shifted your way of thinking, that has shifted your action. You're moving in a different way because of some catalyst that has ignited your passion. According to Eliana Love, the CEO of Purpose Link Consulting, she said, passion is therefore better defined as the outward expression of one's inner purpose. It is the energy that can be tapped to accomplish deeper life goals, one that extend well beyond the mundane and the material. When it comes to passion, you need to have that, especially when you're dealing with the mundane aspects of life. Routine, day in and day out, sometimes can be very taxing and sometimes can relegate you into a place to where I got to do this for a paycheck, or that I don't have anything else to do, or you've concluded I'm too old to go back to school to get an education, or I'm too old to be accepted to start a new career. Whether it be any of those kinds of things, or it could be something divine, something that you may feel like, and I really would like to do something about this. I really believe that God wants me to do something about this. But let me tell you, without passion, it doesn't matter what kind of idea that you have in your mind. Without passion, it doesn't matter what kind of concept or vision, or even a entrepreneurial enterprise that you may have dreamed up. If you don't have passion to drive you forward, then you don't have the energy to tap into that deeper life goals that goes well beyond the mundane or the material. Let's go a little bit further. Last time we talked about the story of Nehemiah, and the story of Nehemiah in the Hebrew scriptures has revealed several important takeaways that correlate with a person who's passion driven. Now, we looked at that, and we're going to continue to look at the story of Nehemiah, and through a lens to where maybe you have never looked at, to understand, what does it take for me as a Christ follower? What does it take for me as a difference maker? What does it take for me as an entrepreneur? What will I need to be the kind of person that converts an idea into an action plan, that sees it through, that doesn't start it or stop it? I've been guilty of that. Have an idea in my mind, and boy, I'm so enthralled about that idea, and I get excited for the moment. But then I don't have the wherewithal, I don't have the passion driving me enough to continue. So I'll start and I'll stop. And I'm sure some of you have experienced that kind of start-stop aspect when it comes to some idea that you've had in your mind, or some goal that you want to accomplish. I think Jesus said it best utilizing the parable of the sower. And in that parable, he talks about this. He said that when you sow seed by the stony places, that it springs up, but because of the heat, it causes the plant to wither away. He said that's the kind of person that hears the word, but then they get excited. They start out for a while and they do fine, but then all of a sudden, because of tribulation, or whatever the type of pressure that's in the kitchen, or whatever kind of heat that's in the kitchen, because of this, they began to wither away. They began to draw back from it. And many times we may have found ourselves in things that we've started, but we didn't have the passion to finish it. It's going to take not only the passion to start it, it's going to take the passion to finish it. And it's going to take passion in between there to keep it sustained. Sometimes in sustaining an idea that's in your mind, you may experience a drought in your life to where you don't see anything that you ever thought about, anything that you ever planned, any goal that you ever set. You don't even see it happening. So one of the things that a passion-driven person must employ in their life is the ability to be patient along with your passion. Because sometimes life happens. Sometimes things come to where we have to set our passion on a shelf and come back to it at a later time. Hopefully, it's not because of procrastination that I set my passion aside. But sometimes life itself tells us and directs us that I've got to set this back for a moment to address something that's more meaningful, or something that's more demanding. On the other hand, passion is that thing that drives us, that says, look, come hell or high water, I've got to do something about this. come hell or high water, I've got to do something right now. And we're talking about that kind of idea. We talk about that kind of resolve to where we are engaged in a project. We're engaged in an outcome where we've got to do something right now. So, as I said, the story of Nehemiah in the Hebrew scripture has revealed several important takeaways that correlate with a person who's passion driven. The purpose of this series is to call out truth that liberates. Truth that liberates, which relies heavily upon the authority of Scripture and also the experience of others. So let's look in Nehemiah, and I believe this. We can look at chapter 1, but we can go into chapter 2, and we find that in chapter 2, it kind of breaks down even further of what's going on in Nehemiah's life. And in Nehemiah chapter 2, it said, in the month of Nisan, the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was served him, I carried the wine and gave it to the king. Now here is Nehemiah. He's talking about what his role was. He's talking about his lot. He's talking about his purpose. And he makes it known here that his role at this particular time was that he served wine to King Artaxerxes. Now, I had never been sad in his presence before. So the king said to me, why is your face sad since you are not sick? This can only be sadness of heart. Then I was very much afraid. Let's pause for a moment. Now, wait a minute. Now, this, Nehemiah, he was in a role to where he served the king wine. And he was conflicted by the news that we talked about last week, where his hometown, where his family had reported, the decay, the debris, and the burning of the wall, the falling of the walls. He was brokenhearted. And now he's at a place to where there's a shift that's going on. And now his king, whom he served, recognizes something's wrong with my servant. Something's wrong with Nehemiah. Something's wrong with this man. And never before had he been sad. But now even the king recognizes that he wasn't sick, but the sadness that he was experiencing was one of heart and not of health. And it says that he was very much afraid and said to the king, may the king live forever. So he started out in a respectful tone, but then now we're going to see Nehemiah's passion. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my ancestors' graves lies waste, and the gates have been destroyed by fire? Then the king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servants have found favor with you, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my ancestors' graves, so that I may rebuild it. So here was Nehemiah. He was conflicted. He was distraught. And now he's got to face up to what the king is requesting of him. So he was kind of afraid because of what he was passionate about and about the fact that he needed to disclose to the king, look, I need to go down to Jerusalem. I need to be with my people. I need to go and do something about this. And I need to go and do something about this right now. So what did he do? After the king had asked him what he wanted, again, what Nehemiah demonstrated is what we talked about last week. And the one thing that Nehemiah demonstrated is that he was a person of prayer. If you are driven by a passion, you've got to be a person of prayer. And let me tell you that sometimes it's your prayer life that gives the passion the drive that it needs to move forward. Sometimes it's your prayer life that gives your passion the drive that it needs to move forward. Well, in this case, Nehemiah, he said, I was just a cupbearer. Yet in the midst of him being a cupbearer, when he disclosed to the king about what the condition was, and the king asked him, what is it that you request? What did Nehemiah do? He prayed to the God of heaven. And then he came back and disclosed to the king what it is that he really needed in order to go do something right now. Verse 6, King said to me, Queen also sitting beside him, how long will you be gone? And when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me and set him a date. Then I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me, to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may grant me passage until I arrive in Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, directing him to give me timber to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I asked, for the gracious hand of God was upon me. Well, let's look at this. Sometimes we discover our passion in a position that no longer fulfills us. Sometimes we discover our passion in a position that no longer fulfills us. Nehemiah was just a cupbearer, someone assigned to quench the thirst of another. Nehemiah realized that his interest had shifted. The news of the broken and burned down walls of Jerusalem ignited a passion in him to do something about this right now. Nehemiah, like many of us, have come to that place where what we've been doing no longer serves us. Let me say that one more time. Nehemiah, like many of us, have come to the place that what we've been doing no longer serves us, no longer satisfies us, no longer fulfills us. We've discovered a passion that has been latent, but only comes to the surface when summoned by a greater need than what we've been doing. Sometimes it's somewhere in our heart what it is that that's latent. And maybe, again, passion and purpose are interwoven. They're connected. So you got a purpose that's driven by passion. You got a passion that's driven by purpose. And sometimes it's latent. And so sometimes we just go through life doing what we normally been doing or doing what we have to do. And by doing what we have to do, we overlook maybe something that's already inside us that's telling us that there's something greater than what you have been doing. That passion is latent until the time comes when it's surfaced, when it's summoned to the surface, when it's summoned to a greater need that's beyond the mundane of what we've been doing. So that's one of the things that we learn here. Nehemiah realized that in order to fulfill his passion, it would require the help of others. He not only prayed to the God of heaven, but he inquired of the king on earth. Nehemiah realized that he needed the favor of God and man. Now let me say this. Don't think that the passion boiling in your heart, that you can do it all by yourself. You will need both favor with God and favor with man. Being an American comes with its own problems along with its privilege. And some people live within the privilege while being duped with or where the problem is being matched. And the problem that I see being masked today that has crept into the church is the poison of individualism. When I say being America comes with its own problems, here's one of the problems: the poison of individualism. We are taught and conditioned that we don't need the help of others. You know, that's one of the problems that not just as not just part of the culture of being an American, but it's also spawned in a Western paradigm of thinking that it's about the individual. And yet we find, as we look at scripture and we find as we look at other aspects of life in other cultures, that it is not the individualism that really is that's really highlighted, not from a scriptural standpoint. In fact, it's beyond the individual, it's the community. In fact, certain proverbs and certain adages, not only from the African adage that says it takes a whole village to raise a child, but it's just the idea seems to flourish within some of our indigenous societies where they're more bent on community and family than they are upon the success of just the one. It's about the success of all or the success of none. And so the poison of individualism causes us to only think about what's in it for me and what I can do that's going to help me. Not saying that we should not be concerned about things that only require our capacity, that only require us to do something. But there are times when even when we're doing all that we can with all that we have, that we realize, like David, King David, where he surrounded himself with champions. We have to implore, we have to inquire, we have to beckon for the help of others, not because we're so weak and we can't get it done, but because we're so wise and realize it's going to take the help of others to fulfill what God has placed in our heart. So, spirit-born passion requires unity and community. Spirit-born passion requires unity and community. Let's go to verse 9. Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent officers of the army and cavalry with me. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. So I came to Jerusalem, and I was there for 3 days. And then I got up during the night, I and a few men with me, and told no one what God had put into my heart. Then I said to them, see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so that we may no longer suffer disgrace. I told them that the hand of my God has been gracious upon me, and also the words that the king had spoken to me. Then they said, let us start building. So they committed themselves to the common good. Let me pause here for a moment and point out something that, again, that Nehemiah did that we need to consider. Even when in the presence and in the knowledge that others were displeased with what he was about to do, he got up early that morning, took a few men with him, but he was cautious and patient. He was looking for the right time to disclose what God had said to him and what the king had also agreed to. Let me tell you, timing is everything. Now, he could have showed his trump card, but he waited to the right time in the midst of criticism to begin to decide on how he was going to approach his own brethren about what it is that God wanted him to do. And we find that that was the case here. We find that what? He told them, the hand of God has been gracious upon me, and also the words that the king had spoken to me. In fact, that we read back there that the king Artaxerxes had sent an army with him. He's got letters in his hand, to get through the forest. He's got everything that he needs from in terms of supplies so that what he had in his heart to do, he could begin to build. A passion-driven person is wise enough to know when and what to disclose to others. So they committed themselves, not just Nehemiah. So they committed themselves to the common good. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Geshem the Arab heard it, they mocked and ridiculed us, saying, "What is this that you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" Then I replied to them, "The God of heaven is the one who will give us success. And we, his servants, are going to start building. But you have no share or claim or extort right in Jerusalem." Nehemiah realized that he had been called to do something greater. So let's look at the takeaways from this episode or this particular section of Nehemiah's story. Let me say this. Not everyone is going to be passionate about what you're passionate about. Just because it's burning in your heart and just because you feel good about it doesn't mean that everybody else is going to feel the same way you do. Even if you see that it's right and you know that it's right, it doesn't make it right for somebody else. Because sometimes your passion is going to reveal who are your friends and who are your foes, whom you need to love from a distance and whom you need to have very close allies for what God has placed in your heart. Secondly, courage many times is the only comfort zone for criticism. When you're being criticized and you being looked at like Job's friends, and you know you haven't done anything wrong, yet you seem to be in good trouble, let me tell you, courage is the only comfort zone for criticism. Thirdly, there are some people that don't want the change that you seek. Because why? They are too concretized in the way things have always been. We kind of elaborated upon this earlier. Don't everybody want the change you're looking for? Some people want it to stay just like they are because by staying just like it is, it means that they ain't got to do anything. It means their apple cart is not, it has not been overturned. It means that what? Their boat has not been rocked. In other words, if we keep things like they are, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Let me tell you, there are times that we need to take action, and there's times when we decide when inaction is the best action. But let me say this. There are some people that don't want the change that you seek. So let me tell you something. Quit asking them. Quit asking them. Find somebody else that is already warm and fuzzy about the idea that you have in your mind. Don't waste your time with people that are not really on board with what you're talking about. Keep it moving, as I often would hear it. Fourthly, assess your personal capacity to fulfill your passion. Jesus said it best. Whoever intends to build a tower, the first thing they do is sit down and count the cost to see whether or not they have the ability to finish it. Sometimes in assessing the inventory to start and finish building a building is assess your personal capacity. How much passion do you have? How much patience do you have? How much commitment do you have to the very thing that you are endeavoring to do? And lastly, some people need to be reminded to mind their own business. Let me tell you, I learned this, and others have probably have said something very similar. If somebody thinks that you're crazy, the best thing that you could get from them is for them to leave you alone. Because why? They're going to leave you alone because they think you're crazy. Now you can get the work done. Sometimes we have to be forward and let folk know to mind their own business because this ain't got anything to do with them, as we learned here. You have no lot of right in what belongs here to Jerusalem and to the people associated. Sometimes people need to be reminded of that. So, I trust that you got something more out of the story of Nehemiah. We're going to delve into some more characters as well, and we might even find some more truth in the life of the Nehemiah story. The truth is, when you're passion driven, not only do you have to do something about it, but in many cases, it requires you to do something right now. God bless you. We'll talk to you soon on the next time here on Talking Points.